I don't think that I have issues, and I know it comes off that way publicly, and I can never really convince any of you guys otherwise, but like, I don't have trust issues with people in terms of like opening up to people or talking to people.
No, don't think superficial. Think about like, would you trust me right now if I asked you for your bank number, like your social security number?
Of course, 100%. You would. Yeah, I would for you, yeah.
Stop it, Steven. No, you would not. You should not.
For you, Brittany? Yeah, I don't think you'd f me over, of course.
Oh my God, what evidence do you have that I wouldn't be crazy?
I feel like I've spoken enough with you personally that I'd probably trust you. I think I would.
Can I?
Yeah,
I don't know if I would trust Lab with that information, but.
So this, you shouldn't. I would rub you blind.
I've heard Lab say some crazy shit. I don't know how I'd feel about that. I feel like it'd be part of one of her fucking plans. But yeah, I think I would trust the gun.
So, I mean, this is a...
Jesus.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Do you need aftercare?
The success of the charitable model. When you interact with people, you're incredibly charitable. This has been a valuable growth strategy for you, as it allows new people to interact with you in interesting ways, despite the real possibility that they're awful people. It sustains the model you laid out a few streams ago, cast of interesting and disagreeable orbiters, leads into a controversial event, /take comes out, leads into research, leads into debate, leads into drama over Fallout, leads into repeat. Without your charitability and your willingness to defend the people who come on your stream, the retention rate for orbiters would be very low, and that they would be more easily discouraged by your community's negative feedback. You make excuses for people who wrong you, and you seem willing to take back. This email was from like, I think a week ago, so this isn't related to the Brittany stuff actually, but you make excuses for people who wrong you, and you seem willing to take back people pretty quickly, even if they wrong you in serious ways, such as for the Zerka and Anna drama. The current fire situation is a perfect illustration of where this can spiral out of control. I argue that this charitability and willingness to forgive works so effectively because you have huge overlaps with the people you interact with. Even when a Mr. Girl or a Zerka snakes you, you can preserve your reputation because such a huge portion of their audience is already familiar with you. Even the forgiveness/uncertainty of contentious orbiters stimulates debates within the community, which further boosts growth. This is in regards to the Farah person. The failures of the charitability model. With Farah, these conditions don't apply. She's not another orbiter, she's another planet. This means that when she snakes you or shows the proclivity to snake you, your charitable approach fails. Her giant audience is not familiar with you in the same way that prior snakes' audiences were, so false or misleading narratives spread very quickly and you lack effective right of reply. This is part and parcel of creating new relationships and growing on new platforms. So I know it is kind of impossible to avoid this situation. However, I think there are a few things you should be doing that could help. Partial solutions. I know you view a lot of discussions through a probabilistic model, but you need to apply this more stringently. When you interact with new people, you should be assigning some probability to their snakiness and act accordingly. Let's say that after the first 4-hour conversation, we give her a 20% chance of snaking you. When you make decisions about future conversations, you should ask yourself, what can I do to minimize snakiness? What can I do to mitigate the negative impacts of a snake? I think with this model, you should demand more of the people you interact with. With Farah, given her newness, you should always be insisting that you get your own recording of any conversation. You can leverage your massive channel to get this with a lot of people, I would imagine. This especially applies to someone like Farah because if she snakes you, this could cause huge reputational damage. If you demanded this of her, she might never clip you up so snakely. This should be a huge concern when dealing with highly controversial topics like rape. And then punishment of large snakes. Even when you do find someone to be a snake, you are so charitable that they feel almost no repercussion for snaking you. Again, this is not awful when the snake is highly incentivized to come back to you and move on, like Zerka, but the incentives for Farah are weaker. I think you should be making TikToks yourself on camera, giving your side of the story. You should be telling people to email her, asking her to take her video down /clarify, and you should be telling DGGers to counteract the pro-rape clips with clips of all your anti-rape takes over the years. If you don't care enough to enforce your boundaries in the moment, you'll regret it later when they destroy your reputation with tens of thousands of people with their dishonesty. It's kind of doom appealing, but you can't always blah, blah, blah. I don't think that, for whatever, I know, people disagree, I don't care. I don't think Farah was like trying to snake me or anything. But I think there's like something that I take from this that I'm trying to think about yesterday, because I'm trying to figure out what is happening in terms of, hold on. Obviously I have to try to figure out what's happening in terms of people doing their thing. So, I wrote notes to my phone when I was walking. I like being very charitable to people because obviously it carries with it a couple of huge pros. One is that I get to talk to more people, I get to talk to more different types of people than any other streamer does, I think. Because I think I'm the only streamer my size who's willing to talk to so many different people. I think that generally, once you hit my size, you basically only hang out with people of a similar size. You never talk to smaller content creators ever because there's no clout, there's too much risk, there's just too much potential downside. So I like that aspect of being ultra charitable and of being really open because then you get new, interesting people. However, I think what I need to do more stringently is I need to be way more careful in terms of how I evaluate the character of a person. And being personally charitable, there has to be a difference between my personal level of like friendly charitability that I extend to somebody versus like my public facing attitudes towards somebody. So I think that I'm just gonna try to, I'm gonna mentally keep this in mind, that I will publicly update my audience on where I think I stand with certain people that more accurately reflects the probability of what's happening rather than like the ultra charitable personal model I tend to extend to people, if that makes sense. So like in my mind right now, like Sneako is at like a 60% like snake level because the comments gonna be publicly, right? So I think that if I keep people's opinions like relatively guided in that trajectory or that direction, then like if something happens in the future where like he massively shits on me or does something, then I'm like, yeah, okay, of course, because we saw that kind of happening. If I apply this retrospectively with Brittany, that I shouldn't call it snake level, but like the flip level, I don't know how to call it, but the volatility level I think would have increased dramatically from almost nothing to like 60, 70, 80% after the rape conversation. And then also when the public is on notice like that, when things like this do happen, it's like more understandable. Yeah, that's what, so I think I'm gonna try to do that type of thing like more and more often. I'll try to update based on events that are happening and then have like a public, kind of like a rolling public perception of where I stand with people so that it's not like such a huge, like what the fuck just happened thing. Do you think the rape conversation can't be resolved? I think I'm doing a lot of mind reading here. The problem is I don't trust Brittany to understand her own feelings, and I don't know if she would be honest with herself or with me if I asked her. So I know that will get triggered issues, but I don't, there's no personal, I don't think there's any value in talking to Brittany about it. But if I had to guess, I think there's two big things that happen. I think there were two huge things that were happening with Brittany. This is my guess. God, did this really unsign me in? Two big things that were happening with Brittany is, one is I think that Brittany is somebody who thinks that like when they have an opinion, if their friends don't agree with them, then that friend is being like disrespectful. She really values when people listen to her advice and take it. It's very, very, very important to her that she has that dynamic, I think, with people she talks to. When I went back and I listened to like her like sucking off Sneako and, oh, he's so open-minded, blah, 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 I actually think that the only reason she thinks that is because Sneako is more likely to listen to her personal advice than I am. And by the way, I don't even think Sneako is listening to her personal advice. He probably just like agrees with her when she talks. But I think that's one big part of it. For me, and I have this problem with other people. Now with Brittany, it got a little bit more exacerbated. But if I have an opinion about something, especially a strong opinion, it's that way for a reason. It is incredibly rare that your one personal experience is gonna move the needle for that on me, unless you've got an astounding personal experience that I've never considered before. So for instance, when I talked about like, I think generally when you go back home with people, usually when I have sex, when Anna, the Ukrainian girl came up and she was like, oh, like sometimes we go home to like hang out and watch movies and stuff, because like going out to theaters is really expensive. I never actually considered that from like an Eastern European, like even in America, like even if you're like working class, like you can usually afford to like go out to the movies. You might sneak in some like M&Ms or something. You don't buy that, but you can afford that. But I never thought like, oh yeah, maybe the affordability of things in other countries dramatically changes that dynamic. I never considered that. And that's something that would like radically reshape, you know, that would be like an example of somebody told me some new piece of information. I'm like, oh, I never considered this is true, right? But so I think that's one really big thing is that and this isn't just her, but a lot of people really want you to take their personal experience as like gospel. And when you don't take that, it's very hurtful. I re-listened to that entire stream that Brittany did. It was like 3 or 4 hours. And that was a reoccurring theme a lot. And I think she brought that up against me several times. Like, oh, Destiny's not open to new experiences. When she says Destiny's not open-minded or open to new experiences, what she's really saying is Destiny's not listening to me. Destiny's not taking what I'm saying as true. Destiny's closed off to my experience. I want him to, And then there's a whole other psychology that goes into that of like, well, if I don't agree with you and you think I'm reasonably smart, then there's a cognitive dissonance because whatever idea you're selling me probably validates a lot of her own trauma or problems too. So when I am not taking her personal experience as gospel, I'm also invalidating a lot of like emotions that she has. So there's like a whole thing for that. So that's one thing, number one. That's one thing, number one. And then the second part is, I run into this a few times. This is just gonna sound really arrogant, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I will sound arrogant because fuck it, I don't give a fuck, and I don't care if you fucking think I'm arrogant. I do know a bit about a lot of the things I talk about, just because I have read things I do. Even when I'm posing questions on stream, like I've read a few things, and I have like an inkling of like the direction, and unfortunately, a few things is more than 99% of people, okay? So when I was proposing those like rape and trauma questions, I was like, oh, I wonder if you have a predisposition of their protector. I knew, of course I know to some extent, this is kind of true, right? I've taken a basic psychology class. We've watched a lot of psych videos. I've read quite a few fucking psych studies across different things. And I'm familiar with like the larger bodies of like general trends and shit, right? We did a lot of like trauma, dissociative amnesia research. We were looking about the satanic panel, right? Okay, I'm not like an expert, but I know a few things. I think Brittany sees herself as like an expertised person when it comes to relationships and trauma. That's like her one area of expertise. And in her mind, I'm like a nerdy guy that plays video games on the internet and I talk politics. So when these two worlds collide, again, area of expertise and personal experience, she should be like the master of that domain. Like, oh, well, if I'm gonna talk about anything related to trauma or whatever for Steven, I'm gonna know, of course, way more than him. She didn't, and she doesn't. She doesn't know that much about where the research is on trauma or anything. She's probably never done any research there. I'm not even fully sure if she read that book, The Body Remembers. I don't even know if she's read that book. Because I got a lot of people emailing me excerpts from that book where it's like, hold on, this is actually a really good book that has a lot of research, but people misquote it in a lot of different ways. I'm like, oh. But so I think that was another issue too, to where she had an area of expertise. She felt like, I don't have that area. And then when I contradict her there, and then when she talks to an expert and it's like, oh shit, she was completely wrong, completely. And then I'm not even sure if she can tell, like when she was talking to that psychologist, like maybe I should have pointed this out more. I think I did when I was listening. Like, it's very clear that she's like angling for certain answers, and he's trying to be very careful to give her like not like the most brutal answer ever. Like even when she asks that last question of the psychologist, where she or the therapist, psychologist, where she's like, hey, like, so would you say it's more of a mental thing or would you say it's more of a physical thing? Like that's not a real question. She's looking for validation there, right? Please validate me and tell me that it's not a mental thing, because it can't be the case that it's a mental thing, because if it is, then that means that I'm weak and I fucked up. That's like her thought process. And even when he answered that, he's like, oh, well, it's definitely both. But then he reiterates but like there are definitely like mental factors that like play into it, right? That last question is a really big thing. So I think that both of these things were blown fucking wide open in the rape discourse, but they also came up in that sex worker talk too. But I didn't consider her proclivity for being that upset in either of these areas, so I didn't think that it was that big of a deal too. But she brought that up a couple times with me and with Abba, to where, oh, Destiny and Abba are closed off because of the sex worker thing. They didn't trust me or believe my experiences, which is funny. I didn't go back and check the VOD. Somebody go, I'm pretty sure I told her in that conversation, because I think we had a disagreement over like, can you healthily engage in like girlfriend experience stuff or DMing sex workers? I'm pretty sure I said in that conversation, after she said it, was like, oh, maybe some people can engage with it in a healthy manner, and I just didn't know. But But that wasn't enough, I guess, because I needed to take what she said as gospel. But yeah. Okay, I'm pretty sure this is what happened. None of that is a problem per se. These are all like features of different humans. That's fine. But when I started to, especially after the rape conversation, when I saw the reaction to that, I need to privately, the problem is privately, it's very hard to like hurt my feelings. It really is, privately. But publicly, there's a lot of like weird credibility issues, and there's a lot of weird audience confusion if I'm willing to be so charitable to somebody in a public manner that doesn't coincide with the likelihood of them like flipping horribly, right? Like privately, if you fuck me over a little bit and we don't talk, it's like whatever. But publicly, if it happens, it just takes on like a different life. So yeah, so I'm gonna be more honest with my assessment publicly of people in terms of like what I think is gonna happen or where I think they're at, rather than like the endlessly charitable model. I'll still like talk to new people and let them on and shit, but I'm just gonna be a little bit more honest. Yeah, I'll be a little bit more honest about where everything is, I guess, yeah. Okay, I'm pretty, yeah, I think that's... This comment explains some of this as well. Which one? There were a couple comments on my subreddit that, I don't know if you tried to link to something, but... Do you think you're too charitable? Like, are you okay with the level of fucked you're getting for that charitability? I'd be more okay as long as I'm like more public about what's happening, I think. Oh, this comment, yeah. Actually, this comment I agreed with a lot. I reread a lot of my sub at like 5 or 6 a.m. last night. It's unfortunately not surprising. When she had that argument with Mr. Girl before, she spiraled for a few, okay. I don't want to spend too much time on it, because this isn't like a whole like shit on Brittany stream. I don't want to, I'm just trying to, I just have to assess like what's going on. I'd say, what was this even in response to? Oh, it does say Black Brittany, okay. A wild statement from Brittany. I was a fan of her and a lot of this community liked her as well. This seriously is a total left field nuke. She always came off as someone who was very good at listening, regardless of your opinion of her worldview system. I can't imagine someone who actually listened to Destiny's statements could make these statements, though, at the very least with this level of confidence and vitriol. It's unfortunately not surprising when she had that, oh, another example, I'm sorry, I just remember this, because I watched through her VOD from start to finish. So it's funny because she's very, very, very critical of my relationships and then of me giving any relationship advice, but somebody asks her at the end of her stream about her relationship, and then she mentions that like she met somebody and is marrying them and moving countries in like 3 months, and she's like, oh, I recommend like everybody try this. And I'm like, what the fuck? But it makes sense if I reframe it through like, she considers herself expertised in the field of like relationships and relationship advice, and she considers like her ability to give advice in these matters to be like, this is my domain, I give advice and people ought to follow what they should. It makes more sense when I reframe it through that, basically. But no fucking shot she said that link. Well, okay, maybe my somebody can like, I think it's in the last like 10 minutes before her stream ends. You can go and find the clip if you want. So it doesn't seem like I'm it doesn't seem like I'm making that up if you want. I'm pretty sure it's like 8 to 9 minutes towards the end, I think.
He slept with Anna without telling Melina everything.
No, but it's not this. It's like 8 to 9 minutes from the end. I don't want to go dig through a fucking video because I want to spend like hours like watching her shit today. God, I like how she has like just disconnected. She has like, she's so off on like so many random parts of my life too.
Express my feelings, and I don't need to do that with the internet. I would prefer to do that with just my hate. I understand that that happens. I think Steven is a good person. I think Steven struggles with joy in his life, but I think we all do, so I think that's pretty common. The only things I know about Sneako are the few private conversations we've had and what I've seen from his content, so obviously I'm only speaking from those things. I could be wrong. So if you guys think I'm wrong, great. It just doesn't matter, right? What matters is that we're trying. If your job is to be open and hear people, I'm happy to be heard.
Are you not worried that assigning your friends a probability or trivializing the complex relationship, at least with more important friends like Kyle and Dan, could this contribute to making relationships more disposable? No, I just have to be honest about like where things can break down. Like with Dan, like the only thing that can break down is like my life gets too crazy, and then Dan and I split because of that. Like, that would be an issue. With Kyla, things could get too crazy if I have a disagreement with her over some opinion that she's expertised in, especially if she feels like I'm too uneducated to have that take, or I'm not giving her a fair shot. So like, for instance, like we disagree over like dissociative amnesia a little bit, I think. I don't think she would, but like that, like if that relationship broke down, it would probably be along those lines, would be my guess. It's just being a little, I'll just be more open about like where I think, yeah, instead of just like, oh, like I think this person's cool and I'll like vouch for this person or whatever, right?
I just don't think all people can hear people, and I think that's what's so difficult about communication, right? We live in different realities. We have different relationships with
Kelly, you're just a wild card, okay? Who knows?
our bodies and our words. We have different relationships with our joys, right? If you're happy and you're joyful, great. Show that with your life. If you're upset, admit that with your chest, right? So, is there anything else y'all want to talk about while I'm here? I'm trying to think. I have a podcast coming up actually with Steven and Sneako in it, so that's pretty cool. And one of my streamer friends.
Oh God, I recorded something with her like a week ago.
And I'm gonna make a video about middles that's really, really good. So props to both of them for making time to be on it, because I appreciate it. I like that a lot. I'm happy to talk to Destiny in private. I would love for Steven to get to know me more as a person. We haven't had a lot of opportunities to get to know each other as people. I'd love to be something more than a crystal girl.
This comment, I'd like to be something more than a crystal girl, is interesting because, again, I've defended her so much publicly, but I think in her mind, the only type of validation she's looking for is like, he needs to, she needs to, agree with, or I'm sorry, she has to give advice and I have to agree with it, basically. That's like the frame of reference for like understanding her, basically.
But at the same time, that's not necessary. I understand we don't have a lot of time in our lives, and there's a lot of people we have to prioritize over each other, so that's okay as well. So yeah, we can talk about it in private when he has a moment. I think that would be most reasonable, because I'm not trying to win a debate. I'm trying to be vulnerable and express my feelings, and I don't need to do that with the internet. I would prefer to do that with just my friend listening, not the internet listening. Okay, so I watched Cuties this morning, so I could fucking talk about it. So I could be like, yes, just normal movie bros. You don't like it the way it's filmed, don't watch European films. Like literally, if you don't like the way it was filmed, don't watch European films, right? Sneako and our children, I love them. They're like little bros. I want to give them both noogies and tell them that they're working it out. Sneako, I have this video coming up about this actually. That's really great. Well, it will come up. You'll see it. But yeah, it's actually about Destiny Sneako.
I'm not gonna be able to find that clip. I don't want to rewatch this fucking thing again. Oh, it's here.
Shit on my relationship. It is quite an anomaly. It's a great relationship, but it is. I did a courting version of dating, which is really, really specific to a bubble, and it worked out really well for me. But it's definitely unorthodox. I really recommend it though. Jessica says you don't want to argue with someone who's... I feel like that's a wild statement to make, given like the totality of everything else she said in the video, but whatever. I don't know. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll read these two comments and then we're moving on from this. Okay. It's unfortunately not surprising. When she had that argument with Mr. Girl before, she spiraled for a few days until she could find an argument that he had no moral compass. And so she didn't need to worry about his opinion of her and then felt better. In this case, she had a disagreement with Destiny and brought on a psychologist to talk about trauma properly, who basically agreed with Destiny, and he accidentally rubbed it in when reacting live by talking about how he felt she was unable to accurately summarize his points to others. This is a big challenge to her sense of self, her understanding of herself relative to him as someone who understands trauma better for having gone through it. If he can come out with better takes than her, at least from the perspective of the psychologist, without any first-hand knowledge, then this can challenge their relationship to one another because he isn't simply unable to see outside of his bubble and understand the experiences of people with trauma, but is actually able to accurately guess underlying patterns of those experiences better than someone who experiences them. This is fundamentally a different challenge to the challenge of having a different worldview. It's the general problem of wanting to say, well, from your perspective, this is how the world works, but from my perspective, it works like this. When research allows you to demonstrate a degree of authority over others and show that it only appears to work a certain way, but actually there's a deeper understanding that people have to decide whether they can accept. They can't simply treat it as another point of view. I notice that Brittany does this thing a lot where she's like, well, for my bubble, I think for my bubble, sometimes it's a way to say anything without saying anything, right? That it's like, oh, well, if you say for my bubble, I basically have carte blanche to make whatever statement I want because I can say, well, for my bubble, it makes sense. And then like, that's it. You're not actually like, you're not making like meaningful statements, right? It also means that he believes he's able to understand her perspective and model it, but she isn't able to do the same for him. So rather than her transcending bubbles, her perspective could be considered as a more limited version of the one he's reaching for. If the previous pattern is any useful point of reference, she will shit-talk him for a bit, do a bit of research, and eventually find some personal win relative to him that allows her to stabilize her sense of self relative to him. And if that win is compatible with a friendly relationship, move back into contact, but it isn't clear that can happen.
This guy says, so you're saying Destiny popped a hole in her level 5 bubble. Potentially, specifically, there's a problem of whether they simply have a two-way miscommunication or if there's something he understands better than her. Now, he isn't claiming that at the moment. He's trying to stay in an explorative mode, even if he has a bias in a certain direction, whereas she has a much firmer position that she isn't able to get much purchase with. But the issue is that they're having a disagreement where there are material facts at hand, and even if he's trying not to win versus her attempts to buttress and reinforce her perspective on the nature of trauma are so far supporting points she challenged in the past. So even if he's not trying to win, it's still possible for her to lose. Loose, he said, dumb fuck. It's also worth saying that I think she does actually have the emotional maturity to not necessarily repeat a previous pattern, and saying she'd rather have a conversation in private may indicate a disinterest in a competitive dynamic developing between them on this issue as public content creators. This could, for example, be the thing they don't talk about together on stream because they know they disagree and it could be damaging their friendship, etc. A certain amount of this also depends on how much Destiny goes into betrayal revenge mode and how much he tries to move on or respond with a cooler head later. Boom. Okay. Interesting. But, okay. All right. I moved on from this. I'm figured out. Do you see how that not making meaningful statements can be offensive towards them? She might be, well, yeah, I'm being more offensive now because now I figure the bridge is kind of nuked. So yeah, now my statements are going to be way more raw rather than, like, if in a friendly manner, I might say that I think that when you say you're making a statement from a particular bubble, what is happening is you're avoiding like the ability to make more general statements, or it makes it harder to criticize you for saying something that might be incorrect because you're able to like niche it down so much that you are that you essentially escape responsibility for the statements. I think that would be like the thing I'd say. Yeah, Destiny, I don't think she even dislikes you though. She might not, but like, I don't think that I should publicly vouch or associate with or be friends with people that criticize me. That's going to be the Mr. Girl part for this part of the article. But for people that are willing to throw me under the bus and trash me so hard, especially in comparison with somebody like Sneako, that's just like, that's too much. That's just insane. And I know that's insane, so I think that's okay. I'm more interested in your state of mind to go so hard on every aspect of you, your body, your relationships, your morality, whatever else. I think that for a lot of people, this is something I'm never going to get used to this. And I've said this a million times, but like people just, I can't tell if it's rare or if I'm getting gaslit or what. The, like I very much work off of, I feel like this used to be normal on the internet, but maybe not. I very much work off of like an idea of like levels of interactions with people. And you traverse these levels in an orderly fashion. Like, hey, like, you suck at League of Legends. Okay, well, you suck at StarCraft, you know, blah, 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 blah. Like, okay, well, you know, like, f you. You're a brokey fuck, okay? Now you've gotten a little bit personal. You were just making fun of their games before. Now you're, like, personal. I'm broke? Bro, like, I've seen your disgusting house. Like, f you, blah, blah. Okay, well, you know, like, I mean, you go a level deeper. Like, well, you're a fat piece of shit. Like, oh, okay, well, f you, you know, like, you're, like, these are kind of, like, the levels you pretend, like, oh, well, your girlfriend is an ugly piece of shit and she's a slut. Like, oh, well, f you, like, you know, your girlfriend is your left and right hand. F you, you piece of shit, right? You, like, you go through these, like, levels of like, kind of back and forth. But it feels like for a lot of people, it's just, like, it's just, like, there's just, like, one level. Like, if somebody says something to you, then anybody can say anything back and, like, it's all the same shit. Like, that's it. And nobody has like any recognition of this. So like when you flip a switch on somebody, like everything becomes basically open. You're like, oh, well, that person said that I did this. Well, boom, 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 boom. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's, yeah. So I think that a lot of people do that to where when they flip a switch on somebody, like everything becomes like fair game.
Do you think that the friendship experiment failed? Have you given up on it?